trying to tread water till the election. And, but like I said, in the House, we're gonna pass, we're laying down on the table what we think direction of policies ought to be moving America forward. And that's don't let the largest tax increase happen in American history. At least fund the government, at least in the next year. And, that level we reached last year, lay out, timeline to laying out what real tax reform should be. And what Dave Camp, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee House, I met with him this week, and the plan is to lay out and cut these rates. Top rates 25%, both corporate and individual, and and then some of the stuff, some of the deductions, we add that in and see what it does, and play with the numbers, see with the goal of bringing in 18 to 20% revenue of the GDP, which is more historical amount, and have a broader tax base, hopefully. My thoughts on tax policy have always, I chaired the Ways and Means in the House, non-House there, and my thoughts on tax policy is, you're going to have tax cuts, just like life and death. You've got to fund government, but you've got to, have the concept ought to be, the rates ought to be, the policy ought to be a very broad base, so everybody pays their fair share, broad based. And if you have a broad base where you don't have one sector paying this much and one sector paying this much or whatever, then what happens is then you work to keep the rates as low as possible. And so that's where you bring equity in the system, and when you have a system there where it's more equitable, I think it's easier to apply, and Americans will think it's more fair, and you don't have people trying to.
The other question I have is about Obamacare, because every one of us that have health plans for our employees have already experienced close to 30% increase.
Yes. Everybody heard that. You've already experienced.
That part that wasn't going to cost anything, just cost all of us about 30%. And I don't know, I really don't understand, well, I haven't read the law, and I'm not sure too many people in Congress has read it either to really understand the impact it's going to have. But my feeling is if it's in and it goes, then most small businesses are going to seriously consider not providing a pay bill.
Yeah, because the penalty's going to be.
You're not allowed to call it a fine, but whatever it is.
Well, we know it's a tax now. We know it's a tax.
Oh, that's right, they told us it was tax.
It's a tax.
And that's gonna impact a lot of people that they.
No, you're absolutely right. I think the whole thing was, because I wasn't there when that happened, when it was sport. I've already voted 33 times to repeal it, either whole or in part. And the reason we had a vote about 2 weeks ago in the House to repeal it again in whole is because we have a new dynamic, because the Supreme Court ruled that it's a tax.
Right.
Before, we were all working on the concept, it was unconstitutional because of the Interstate Commerce Clause. Because Congress had the authority to do that under the Interstate Commerce Clause. And because what we were saying was, Congress had the authority to make you buy something. You can't think of anything in American history where the public policy has been, or the law has been, that forces you to buy something, okay? And this is unprecedented, and they said, well, under the Interstate Commerce Clause, they have the ability to do that. And so the court, I think, surprised everybody by coming out and say, well, they kind of stepped away from the Interstate Commerce Clause, and they said, well, Congress has the authority to do it because it's a tax. Congress has the authority to levy taxes, and so that's what they ruled. Now, so that reason we voted on it again to repeal it is because now it's a tax increase, one of the largest tax increases in American history. And some of the Democrats in the House voted to repeal it now because of that, half a dozen or so.
Yeah.
So that's, the president said that he said a lot of things about Obamacare. If you have what you like, you can keep it. Find out that's not the case because, things change, the costs go up, and employers keep doing it. And, if you the taxes, tax on will go up. Well, he said he was gonna tax, quote, the middle class. Well, this is a huge tax on the middle class.
And what we had, and when I say our cost, I'm talking about the employee cost too.
Yeah.
Because they participated in providing the plan. And we had to go out and make adjustments in various things to keep the cost down so that the impact wasn't as great, not only on us, but also on the employees.
Yeah.
You know, Congressman, a couple of these things are pretty funny, is that if you talk about the healthcare thing, first off, I think we all have to agree as small business people, Mr. Buckingham, is that insurance is broken, right?
Something
It's
has to
broken.
be done, whether it's about.
So that's a fact,
Right.
but that's where you guys are supposed to be coming into play to get that corrected. But that's a fact. The healthcare insurance is broken. If I buy insurance today and try to utilize it, it's broken. It manipulates the user. It doesn't work for the consumer, and that's a fact. The other thing that's interesting to me is all of us small business owners, how many of you have gone to your team members and sat down and said to them, well, research, how many people you guys employ? 350, 500?
600.
600 people. Have you gone out with all 600 and say, hey folks, here's what the deal is? Because you are better paying the tax. Have you sat and said to them, your contribution or your lack of contribution is going to be you don't have a choice. Us as a company, I'm not going to pay anymore for your thing. So you all know we're going to pay the $2,000 tax is what we're going to do. Mr. Running, have we all done that? Have we gone out and talked to our teams and told them that and let them know what's coming up? That's that aspect of it. But once that gets done, and if I'm you guys on one side of this fence, and it's not a Republican or Democrat, because you're starting to see Democrats agree the same thing. It's a broken philosophy that they have put together. But if you guys don't get out and start talking to business leaders and telling them, you might want to go talk to your teams. I mean, I had that conversation with my folks, not to scare them, but to let them know they have a part of this plan. And you guys are going to lose it. If this thing becomes law, I'm better to pay and let myself and all of you go to the government plan. Now, you talk to many doctors around here and ask them what that government plan looks like, and whether they want to be in practice to practice under that government plan. That doesn't look all too promising, right? Andy Stein might not be in practice. So you're not going to have a good ear, nose, and throat guy to go to anymore as far as a specialist. And Ashland doesn't have a lot of metro resources, so we don't want to lose the few that we have, do we? But that's a countrywide thing, nationwide is some of the thing I see. And the other thing I would suggest to you is from your guys' perspective, and this is a Republican thing. My family, we have Hispanic members in my family, and your relation to getting out to people is not strong. And you're missing the boat here. You need some more Rubio people, you need some other folks that can relate and have a conversation. And no disrespect to Mr. Romney, but the problem that Mr. Romney's having right now, and the why Mr. Obama, how can a guy be still, I mean, think about this. How can a guy still be even leading in any poll whatsoever known to mankind when all of us rely on working and the economy sucks like it does? But you know why? It's because the guy's a fairly charming speaker and he can get out there and have a fairly good conversation. And people get lost in his conversation and they buy into it. So we're going to have to do a little bit better job there and pushing that out not only from your side but to the grassroots side to get this notion out there that let's get past his conversation. Let's get down to what really is going to happen to everybody. Because I'm telling you guys, it's not, when you hear people, and I hear from my family on the Hispanic side that wants to talk about, there's a big misunderstanding about what Mr. Romney and what Republicans, if you will, are about. A huge misunderstanding. And, this thing of giving people a hand up, no one has a problem with that. I hope none of you do. But giving people handouts is a wicked process. And people become addicted to it, people become accustomed to it, and then they just like robots, they just flow along like zombies and just do what everybody wants you to do. And that's really, when you think about it, I'd rather see Mr. Biden. I don't know if maybe you've watched him in a conversation. But Mr. Biden gets out there, this guy talks like he knows what a police officer experiences on a day-to-day basis. I apologize, but you're probably one of the more realer folks out there. Even Mr. Boehner, I don't even know, he knows what it's like to get to a gas pump and what that feels like. And when you're talking $3.67, do they really know? I know Mr. Biden doesn't have the slightest idea what that feels like, and President Obama doesn't, you know, but they get people's attention like they do, and they don't. And you guys have to do a better job letting people know you're just as close to the middle class and just as close to that group of people as anybody else is. It doesn't matter, you know, and you're gonna have to do a better job in that regard, in my humble opinion, because we're losing the attention of what really the focus should be, and it is trying to strengthen our country and get our country and remain to have a country at the level that it has been in the past, and to fight our way out of this recession that we're in right now. And we're not gonna do it with this status quo that's going on right now. You need to spark this thing up a little bit and get a little bit more passion. I would say from a political side, a little bit more passion there. You guys all got elected, you know, so you had to be somewhat of good actors out there. So you need to get out there and put your salesmanship back on again. You know,
Well, I think it takes everybody too, like you just said, you're talking to all your team members.
Right.
You know, and explain to them, because a lot of people, you know, like I always said, in my tenure now being a representative at the state level now of Congress, you feel like a big funnel, but you've got to figure out what's going on and what's best policy. But the people like you're out, you know, running your businesses, and people working for you are supporting their families, and they don't have time to focus on that. But we've got to get people to focus on what's really going on. And your comments, Scott, about on the healthcare thing, you're absolutely right. I believe the whole thing was structured to move everybody in relatively a short period of time over to government.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
Yes.
And that's a total disaster. You know, we have part of that system that Obamacare is called the IPAD Board, Independent Payment Advisory Board, that will make decisions for Medicare and Medicaid, because it'll flow through the whole thing, and what they're gonna pay for. And if you're, you know, I can definitely see if you're a certain age and you need a hip transplant or a heart transplant or something, you might not get it.
No, probably not.
I think that's the government's way of solving Social Security. You don't live as long, you're gonna solve that Social Security curve. Those are two curves.
What's sad about this is that Obamacare is this elephant in the room. It was sold on a premise that there's these uninsured, and we could debate the number, but even at best, if it was 30 million.
It's medical insurance, probably half that.
There's gonna be a whole lot more of those, and we're probably gonna see the number of unemployed catch up to that number too. So he's just destroyed both ends of the spectrum. I think the focus, and what I'm hearing, did you say 2 businesses, you guys? I heard a statistic which blew me away. I thought it was a little embellished, but they said it was well over 100,000 small businesses. It was like 150,000, or 200.
I think it was 200,000.
Have gone out of business since '08. Okay, so you can blame it on some of the factors that led to the recession, but what's happened since then has escalated that. And maybe they said maybe 3 million potential employment that has been lost due to those businesses. And you just said you're 2, and this one guy here is 2. So that's probably a reasonable number in 4 years. And I think if that can be maybe the message, because we focus on this 1%, we focus on big business, that's such a, you said 8 days, it could fund the country for 8 days if he gets his tax increase just on that 1%. But if this thing hits in January and they confiscate all this tax revenue, it might, what's it, half a year or a year at best?
Right.
We got 16 trillion in spending. I'm in healthcare, okay? I see it on the user end. I see it on the people that are struggling. We had an 11% cut in October at midnight on September 30th that cost our facility 300 grand. That doesn't come from anywhere else. The regulations with Obamacare have already been hitting. We've had 3 or 4 major ones that have cost us a lot of money. And I know it's cost the federal government because they're ramping up bureaucracies to manage this thing.
Yeah.
And they're taking $500 billion, which has already started, out of Medicare,
Yeah.
which would go to people to help them pay for things. That's what the seniors are not understanding. You know, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Medicare is gonna be hit again with the sequester.